Yeah, so we were on the Android virtual device. So the Android virtual device, or AVD, is actually a kind of a simulator for our Android, real Android phone. For example, we can define certain profiles for a phone. For example, if it is Nexus 5 or Nexus 5X or S, whatever, or if it is some other kind of Android or phone, or if it is or if it is, you can say Nexus 7 or something, Samsung Galaxy or something, all these kinds of phones. So we can define a profile for all of these phones, or some of the phones that we need, or maybe one of the phones that we need, for our app to run on. And then we can, during the run, when we click on the run, we select, for example, which of these simulators should run to show our or to run our app on. It's like an APK is kind of installed on this virtual or simulation of the Android phone. So it really helps. You don't need to connect the real Android phone all the time. You cannot have also all the Android phones all the time with you, and it's also not convenient, for example, again and again, to just plug your Android phone to the laptop or your computer with the help on through the USB, and then run your code every time. So we use, first of all, this AVD before we install the APK on the real device and test on the real device. So this is the main description, a little bit of description about these things, these 4 or 5 things that we really need to know before we start coding, and coding in Android Studio. Now we will go to the Android Studio, and kind of tell you in detail about, for example, at least 3 of these things. For example, manifest file, file Gradle, and Android virtual device, and how you set these things up, these components or these parts up, and then what are the main parameters they are defining, and how they are defined, and how we use this in our first app. And I think after completing those um, lectures, you will be able to to get yourself, quite well acquainted with these things, and will be able to use them very well. So we describe now, first of all, our Android manifest file in detail. So what is a manifest file? As we said before, the manifest file this manifest file is actually a file in the XML file format, and this gives us information about the package, our main package for the sources. What is the permission, for example, for this app and for the other apps to use resources from this app. And the permissions, as I said, include the read or write permissions to the external storage, for example, the internet usage, context read, reading of the contacts, for example, and such kind of information. For example, Bluetooth, all the camera, for example, any kind of resources that you use from your computer hardware, or from your laptop, from your phone hardware. Then you or other apps, not only just phone hardware, or other apps from the phone. So if your app wants to use any of those resources, then you have to define the permissions for each of those particular resources. And then the next thing this Android XML file manifest file describes is the Android API information. For example, which API level your app is going to use. Normally you give the highest API level, the latest one, and it's by default the lower API level supported. The lower API level is then by default supported by your app. And then you have another one important thing, which is version code and version name information. So version code is actually kind of incremented with every new version of your